Has Putin given up on driving the Ukrainians out of Kursk? Is the Kremlin now focused on spinning the invasion to the Russian public? And just how are they going to get the Russian public to accept their own country annexed by Ukraine? I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. Let's talk about it. Okay, so this is a really interesting story coming to us from a senior Kremlin official reported by the Russian independent media outlet Meduza, that the Kremlin is starting to pivot from telling the Russian public that the Ukrainian armed forces are going to be ejected from Kursk in short order to the closer to the reality, which is that Russia doesn't really have a timeline for getting the Ukrainians out of Kursk. Now, the initial August 6th invasion shocked Russian elites and, frankly, the Russian public, but government officials in the Kremlin are now saying that the shock has worn off and they are trying to adapt the Russian public or explain to the Russian public why the Ukrainians are in Kursk. Essentially, the Kremlin is trying to make this, quote, the new normal. In order for things to settle down quickly, the Kremlin's enlisting its propagandists, including mill bloggers and major media commentators, to help Russians adapt to what they're calling the new reality, right? They're actually recycling the term new normal, which, interestingly enough, Kremlin propagandists used during COVID. This terminology is necessary, according to the Kremlin source, so that people think what's happening not as a deviation from but as a new norm, albeit a temporary one. This should be calming. Again, this is pretty comical given the fact that, again, the new normal was, in fact, a temporary one. And the more people should have understood that it wasn't going to be the rest of human existence, Anyway, you don't need me to talk about COVID. Nobody needs that energy. But the key elements of Russia's, quote, new normal are as follows. Ukrainians did penetrate Russian territory, but the Russians are totally going to defeat them. But it's going to take time. Russians will need to wait, right? And the administration, of course, another classic spin doctor move, when your politicians fail to lead the country in a productive and effective way, and people feel mad, they feel outraged, right? Again, the whole function, the Kremlin failed the Russian public just on so many levels. One, they invaded their neighbor for absolutely no reason. Sorry, they did. Two, the vaunted Russian military, one that has taken massive amounts of tax spending and soaked up tons and tons of public money, and has caused a massive inflationary crisis in Russia. That entire thing was unable to protect the Russian borders. Remember, for 2 years, the Kremlin has been spinning to the Russian public that the defeat of Ukraine is just a couple weeks away. And now they are in Russia. So the Russian public has a right to be furious. But the Kremlin spin doctors are urging people to, quote, channel the negativity and shock instead of directing it at the government in a positive direction through aid collection for the Kursk region. The Putin administration has already recommended that regional governments take up a collection. Particularly, they're saying people should donate 1 day's salary to the Kursk Aid Bank. Now, again, will this make any measurable difference in the aid the Russian government provides to the citizens of Kursk? Unlikely. But this is, again, they call it voluntary compulsory. In the military, we called it voluntold. But what's fascinating is that, again, this isn't about aid to Kursk, right? The government, through its taxes, could get aid to Kursk, right? It doesn't require a few dollars from some public servants and the generosity, and some babushkas donating old sweaters, right? But the fact is, the real purpose is, again, to distract the population so that they have these feelings of anger, frustration, betrayal, questioning their government. And what the government doesn't want them to do is direct them towards the government. They want to channel them into meaningless actions where they feel they're doing something about this consternating and frustrating turn of events without actually addressing the core problem head on. And this is, to me, one of the classic spin doctor moves in this day and age, is to channel frustration and anger into directions where, and into pockets where it's unlikely to hurt anyone, or unlikely to cause disruption to the existing system. In fact, again, the Russians are not even going to cancel the gubernatorial elections in Kursk. Still maintaining early voting going down this week, which again, they say canceling it would increase panic and mean the entire region is under threat, according to one Kremlin source. So, refraining from electing a governor could give locals the impression, quote, that the region has already been surrendered. And the same source said there's no threats to voting. Of course, in Donbass, elections and referendums took place and nothing happened. But here's what's most interesting to me. First off, I want to point some things out. One is that Russia, in some ways, both Russia and Ukraine, are making these interesting set of choices. For Ukraine, they're choosing to prioritize, again, this incursion into Russia. And you can see there's been, some level of expansion here. Crucially, it looks like the Ukrainian forces have made it all the way to the bank of the Seine. This is important because, again, Russia, while they're trying to continually install pontoon bridges and other small bridges to help ensure that troops in this pocket here can continue to fight, Ukraine keeps taking them out. And pontoon bridges tend to have pretty short lifespan on the battlefield. And the fact that they are fully cut off in two directions or really in three directions at this point, is a huge problem for these troops. But when you look to the south, and I think this is important too, right? The Donetsk region, you could see that Russian forces are also continuing to advance across these small villages here. And you could see that they're actually trying to encircle sort of this pocket here. And that's part of the strange part about this, is that both sides are yielding territory to the other in some ways by choice, right? Russia could take those forces on offense here and pivot them to defensive operations or retaking Kursk. And Ukraine could take those units that were preparing for and executing the Kursk invasion, and they could have stabilized this situation here. So both sides are saying, listen, there's just not the best use of troops is offense, even if it means enabling the other side to conduct defensive operations, which is actually sort of a pretty wild tactical calculus. Typically in war, you don't see this. You don't, while your enemy's on offense, you don't go on offense generally. And once you go on offense, if it works the way you want it to, the enemy transitions to defense because they realize how ill-prepared they are. So the fact that the Ukrainians are advancing and the Russians are continuing to advance is sort of insane. Now, guys, if you're interested in seeing some of the footage from both of these offensives, that uncensored footage is going to be on combatvetnews.com. You guys know that I depend on you, the viewers, to support me in doing this every single day. The reason being that I don't want to be beholden to a sponsor. I don't want to be beholden to a government. I don't want to be beholden to any media companies. And this is why I have Combat Vet News. I host it. I pay to host all the videos. There's dozens and dozens and dozens of uncensored combat videos on here that YouTube will not let me show you. Analysis from the past 2 years of the war. And it means that even if YouTube were to decide to scrap my channel, right, there's still Combat Vet News. But I depend on you guys to support me. So if you want, of course, Specialist Tier get you access to those twice a week members-only videos. Again, today we are taking a look at some of the fighting from Kursk as well as from Donetsk. Lieutenant Tier gets the weekly Q&A, which also drops today. So get your questions in if you haven't already. And the Colonel Tier gets all that plus the shout-outs at the end of videos. So check us out at combatvetnews.com. The link is in the description, and we'll see you over there later today. So, the priorities for Putin that ISW is kind of inferring from his response to this is that Putin wants Ukraine out of Kursk. Some rumors said that he actually gave October 1st as a date, but that doesn't seem possible. But Putin doesn't want to sacrifice the stability of his regime, which is code for I don't want to throw in a bunch of conscripts to get killed. He doesn't want to deprioritize his Donetsk offensive, and he doesn't want to fire any of his incompetent but loyal subordinates. And we've seen increasingly Putin switching out even experienced generals for people who look increasingly like loyalists. And it's not a great strategic choice. But again, as Putin's stability at sort of the top of the pyramid of corruption that is Russia, as he feels the pyramid is narrowing and things are becoming more unstable, the more he prioritizes loyalty over competence, right? And sometimes competence means telling bad things to the boss, right? That's what a competent person does. A loyal person will never tell bad things to the boss. And again, so for Putin, he has to find this balance between seeing the truth and having people that tell him true things and having people that express loyalty to the nth degree. And it's clear that he needs that, but it's, as ISW points out, it may simply be too much. It may be too many different priorities. But again, never underestimate the ability of Russia to throw men and material at a problem in lieu of actually solving it. Anyway, that's all I had, guys. Be sure to hit subscribe. That makes a difference for me. Tells the YouTube algorithm that I'm making quality content. Of course, a huge thank you to the Colonel tier members, particularly James Sterling, Steve Moran, Doug Beck, Alan Knudsen, Bastian Himmerling, Yanko Georgiev, and Dale McCombs, as well as all of the Lieutenant tier members. I'll see you guys over on Combat Vet News just in like an hour. Catch you guys in the next one. Thank you. Cheers.